Well, today I'm working on the X table linear rail installation, and I'm just kind of going back and checking to see what kind of readings I'm getting on underneath. If you recall, when I originally did this, I set up this baseline, but I've got a different indicator now, and this one reads down to 2 microns. So let me show you what we've got. It looks like we've got a sag here in the middle of about 28, 29 microns, somewhere around in there. So right here we're at 0. But you see, if I go here, 28, get it in focus, Sam. There you go. About 28 microns there in the center, and then the end over here, we're right about 0. Same thing on this other side here. In the center, we're about 28 or so microns. Zero on the ends, and 0 on this end as well. Alright, so now that I've got these readings on the underside, I kind of know that it's dipping down here a little bit over 1/1000th of an inch. 28 microns, 0.01092. Not too bad, I guess. Of course we can shim that up. If it is bowed this way, then we can just shim on the ends and get our rails straight, which is what I'm trying to figure out exactly how to do. So what I want to do now is flip this table over. I'm going to recheck these measurements and see if we're still in the same ballpark there for this dip. Okay, so now I've got the table flipped over. This is the back edge, and this is the front edge here of the table. I want to check and make sure that the dip is still there, and so this, what I'm expecting to find is this to be a little high, and it is. So we're at 0 here, and then we move down to the center, and we're still about our 30 microns or so, which is good. There was no flex. And then we're about 4 microns there. See if I can go over to the other side here. Again, we're about 32 microns here. And then right here we're about 12, 14 microns. And about 14 microns on this side. So what that's telling me is the thickness of the table here in the front is 14 microns thicker than the rear. So apparently whenever they machined this table up, the machine they used was not trammed in, or was only trammed in within a certain amount. So 14 microns is about 5/10 or so. So about 1/2,000th out in thickness, which I guess if their machine's within 1/1000th, they probably are good. So that's probably okay. So now I know that this is high in the center, or the table is bowed in this direction. So when I put my rails on here, I can shim that out. 30 microns is about 1/1000th of an inch there. So what I can do is just shingle in some onion skin or some tin foil, and try not to get my rails bowed and follow along this, but get my rails actually straight. So I think that's the plan moving forward. I'm going to take some notes on this so I'll know how to shim it, and then we'll start drilling and boring some holes and getting these rails mounted. I've got the X table sitting on my 1, 2, 3 blocks, and I've just went around with the indicator, and I put this tape on here, and I just measured basically where every bolt is for the datum here. I found that this is my low point, in this corner. So what I did was I set my indicator to 0, and I just went down and annotated the different heights here. This will be for my shim stock. Once I bore and get ready to mount the rails, I'll know where to place my shims. So it's high in the center. The table kind of bows a little bit, or if it's flipped over, I guess you would say it dips down a little bit. Right here we're 2/10. It is a little thicker. This here is the back edge, the back thickness here, and the front edge is a little thicker. The table's thickness is a little different, so what I want to do is, when I mount my rails, I want to make sure that I take that into consideration when I'm shimming. Ideally, both of these rails and the blocks need to be the same height from front to back. When I flip it over, it should be the same distance on the top of my table, and I'll know that I've actually corrected an issue with the tram that was already built in from the initial machining. So, like I said, I went around and I've annotated all of these different locations. And now what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and start mounting my rail. So I want to get my rail clamped on here and start making sure that I've got it fairly parallel to the datum on this side, and then I can start boring the holes and tapping. So let me get set up for that. Alright, I've moved my table off of the surface plate here. Don't want to get any debris on there. And I've got my first rail clamped up here. I've went down with my indicator, checked it. I'll continue to do so as I go down the rail and bore these holes to make sure nothing moves. I've got a transfer punch, and I'm just lightly before I start boring the holes. So I'm going to go ahead and get a couple of holes and screws in there, get them drilled and tapped, and we'll just kind of gradually move along. You can start in the middle and work your way out. And I'm not sure that it really matters. You just want to make sure that you have everything set right before you start drilling and tapping. There is a little bit of adjustment with the bolts that we're using. We're using M4 for the RG15 rails, which is the recommended size. And so there is just a little bit of wiggle there, but you want them tied up against the datum as much as possible. And remember, we checked this datum, and the datum was straight, and they both were parallel, so you want your rail right up against the datum. Alright, so let me start boring some holes. Okay, well, I've got my first hole bored and tapped. I've got a bolt in there. I've moved the indicator down to my next hole, made sure that my rail was in alignment. If I need to move it slightly in or out to get it lined up, I can do so. I'm going to bore my second hole, and then I just continually work my way down, and then work my way this side, and then continually work my way that side. One hole at a time, and take my time and try to get everything perfect as I'm going along. The transfer punch really helps to keep the bit from wandering when it first starts off. The bushing helps as well, but I found that the combination makes the hole just right. Alright, so you can see how I'm going around drilling and tapping each hole. I just need to do that for all the holes in the rail. This is a fairly long rail. It has about 24 holes in it. I've already bored the holes in the back for the master rail, and now I'm boring for the sub rail. And I ran across something, and I thought, well, this is a good tip, and I'll make sure that I need to point this out. I checked the flatness of my dovetails here, and it was the highest in the center, and then it got lower towards the ends. So one situation that causes is when you're going to mount your rails and clamp them down, of course you want to try to make sure that you're parallel with the other side. Let me zoom out here. So you want to make sure that you're parallel with the other side as you go along, so that, you know, your rail's not wavy. Well, because you're not level and you go and clamp it down on the low spots, it's going to cause deflection in your indicator. The reason being is, this is how we have the indicator set up on this little angled part on the rail. So once we press down on this rail, it's going to deflect the needle and give us a reading that's not going to be the same all the way across. So the highest point right here, when we clamp it here, it's not going to move. So we want to set our 0 there, and we have to take that in consideration as we move down the rail. Alright, well, you can see I've went down and bored, tapped, and installed the screws along the way. I've got about 4 more to go, 5 more to go, and I'll be done. Then we'll have to set it back onto the surface plate and start shimming the rails so that they're both the same height from side to side. Then once we do that, get those correct, then we can check for parallelism. You want to make sure that you have a few of these bushings, because you do kind of wear them out as we go along. There are a lot of holes to drill. Alright, I've got my rails drilled and tapped for both sides. I've now got it up on my surface plate, and I'm setting the height of the master rail. I want to make sure that the rail is nice and level all the way across. I've used a combination of onion skin, tin foil, different shim stock to get it just right. The table is bowed. Actually, it's bowed fairly evenly on both sides. It's about 1/1000 lower on the ends than it is in the center. So it made it a little bit easier. I want to get my rail straight. That way when the table's flipped over, it'll be just about 1/1000 low in the center, but luckily it's even, so I figure with the vise on there and the part in the vise, it should work out well, because, you know, you do most of your machining towards the center, so I think I'll be fine. But let me kind of show you what I've done. So I'm pretty much zeroing. I was pretty much 0 in the middle, so I didn't have to shim. And then, or actually this side was 2/10 lower than this side. This is actually the high side. So this whole side here in the center, I shimmed 2/10. So that should make my table level. But you can, hopefully you can see this. So I'm 0 there. Maybe 1/10 there. Really close there. 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 Get over here. There. And then all the way to the other end. All the way out on the end. Let me reach out there. Alright. So I'm fairly close. I'm within a couple of tenths all the way down the rail. And the height of the rail, the specifications need to be within 3/10. Is that right? I should know this by heart by now. I've done this enough, but let me look at my sheet again. For the x-axis, I believe it was a little over almost 3/10, about a little over 2.5. So I think we're good there. And now what I want to do is I want to make sure my rail is straight, and then I want to mount the sub rail. Pretty happy with the way the rail sits now. Gonna double check it a couple of times, make sure I'm really satisfied with it. I can go back and put I can't get within 2/10 because that's only the thinnest shim stock I have, but I'm gonna try to get this, make sure this rail's straight. I'm gonna permanently set it, and then I'll move over to the sub rail. Alright, now that I've got the height of the rail set all the way down with the shims, I'm going to now make sure that it is parallel with the datum. If you remember, I made sure both my datums were within the 5 micron tolerance. I've got those parallel, so I just want to make sure that my rail is now parallel with my datum. So I'm just going down and checking it with the indicator up against the I'm just going down through here and checking it up against the datum here and the bearing block, and then making sure that it's all parallel. And then once it's parallel, I'm going to go back, I'm going to pull each screw out, clean it real good, Loctite it, and screw it back in and check it, and then set everything. Once I get this master rail set, then I'll turn it around and mount the sub rail. Alright, I've got the table turned around. I have mounted and shimmed my sub rail, and I'm checking now to make sure that the height of my master rail block here and my sub rail block are the same on both sides. This will ensure when I flip it over that the table will be the same height, and we won't have any kind of tram issues. This particular table was a little bit thicker on the front side than it was on the back side. I compensated that when I put the shims in, so I got that set. Now this rail, this block here is set at 0, and what I did was set my indicator here, and then made this front side here the exact same. Let me show you. Alright, let's take a look. So you can see I've got my indicator here set on 0. Hopefully you can see that. And then we'll just move this over to the front side here. I'll put it in the center over here and check it. So that we have the front side here also set to 0, this light. Alright. And then you just go move it on down and double check. Let me see if I can do this. I had to shim this whole area all the way down. To make sure that it was nice and flat. You can see we're good there. It was 8/10 off. You can see I marked it there on my masking tape, and now I've got it to 0. The rail is higher, or the table is higher in the center here, and so on the ends it was a little over 1/1000th total deflection. I think that was probably from the initial machining process. After they machined it, it relieved a little bit, and that's pretty normal from what I've learned. So see, we're pretty close to 0 there, and we were 1,000 out, and then right there you can see the two notations there. We were 3/10 higher than right there, so you know, it's a gradual thing. I didn't have shim stock to get in between there, so I have to do the best I can. And then down here on the other end, I just did the same thing. Right here it was 5/10 out, so I used some aluminum foil, and that brought that back to 0. Again, right in here was 8/10 out, so I used some tin foil and then some 3/10 onion peel to bring that back in. And let me see if I can do this. Keep putting this thing back. And then over here it was 1/1000 plus 2/10 out. And it looks like we're about still a little bit low on the very tip here, but we're 2/10 looks like. So I could have put probably a thicker piece down there and brought that up a little bit. Be patient as you're going down through here, but overall I'm pretty satisfied with the way it turned out. And so now what I'm going to have to do now is, since I got the height of both rails set, now I am measuring from my surface plate to the top of the block. I do have it sitting on 4 1-2-3 blocks. There is probably a little twist in this table, slightly, which is why my measurements on the ends are not exactly the same. Down here it was 0.0013, and then over here 0.0012. Now that I have the 2 blocks and 2 rails set to the same height, now I just need to make sure that this rail is parallel with this rail. So I'm going to set up now, and then I'm going to go down and check, adjust as necessary. I'm going to then lock this rail down, and we'll be done. Alright, well, I went back. I wasn't real happy with this corner over here, so I decided to go ahead and pull the rail back up and fix this corner. It was about 2/10 from where I'd like it to be. So I went ahead and just kind of fixed this. It was actually a little high right here, so I took a shim out here, and that corrected this problem right here. Now this corner is 0. You know, you're going through all this trouble. You don't want to just get it, yeah, okay, that's good enough. You want it to be as good as you can possibly get it. And since I was 2/10, I decided, well, if it's 2/10, I should be able to shim that, since that's the stock I got. So now this right here is exactly on 0 as well. I'm really happy. The rail's good all the way down now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my indicator up here, and then I'm going to put it along the block here, and I'm going to make sure that this rail is parallel with my master rail. So let me get that done, and then we'll come back and we'll take a look. Alright, well, I'm in the garage today, and I'm finishing up the rail installation on the X-axis table. I just finished setting the sub rail and making sure that it was parallel with the master rail and getting it within our 5 micron tolerance. It turned out really well. Let's take a look at what I've got here. Alright, let's see if I can do this without messing anything up. A little shaky here. Alright, you can see pretty good, well within the 5 micron tolerance all the way down the rail. So I'm pretty happy with that. So now that I've got both rails set, they feel really nice. They're not wavy, like side to side wavy, and the height on both rails are really close, well within tolerances. So I'm pretty happy overall with the way this rail installation turned out on the x-axis. So now that we've got our rails mounted on our x-axis, we're going to turn our attention to the column and see if we can't get our z-axis rails mounted, and we'll do that in the next video. If you have any questions or suggestions, as always, please feel free to comment. Thanks for watching the video, guys. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not, and most importantly, be safe.